Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful that you've chosen to spend some of your very valuable time with me as I talk about the games that I played and purchased in the month of November. Now, I did purchase 2 new releases, not just new to me, but new game releases, and both ended up being very big hits. In fact, they were the best of the month. So let's get straight into it here. I'm going to start off by talking about one kid's game, and then I'm going to talk about the rest of my games in order of my lowest rated to highest rated games that I played in the month. So the game that I played with my kids was Hero Kids, which is a children's role-playing game that I download from the website DriveThruRPG. And every time they post a new adventure, I go to the website, I download it, I print it off. Basically, I print off all the map tiles that are used for the adventure. I print off all the monsters and creatures and so on that you encounter during the adventure. Then my youngest son enjoys coloring those creatures and the map tiles in, so because they're printed in black and white generally. And I also print off the booklet for the current adventure, which basically tells the entire story through you. As the DM, myself, playing as the DM for the adventure, all I have to do is basically just read through the story, go through the encounters as they come up, allow the kids to interact and play through the encounters, and all the work is essentially done for me once I've printed it out, cut it all out, and handed it over to my youngest son to color in. It's an amazing system. From a DM point of view, it is so effortless. All the adventures can be played in roughly an hour, even under an hour often, and they're just so well done. They provide often a mix of interesting combat encounters and occasionally some puzzly, how do I get through these obstacles type of encounters. And when I thought about what to rate Hero Kids, I really couldn't come up with anything that I disliked about it, other than maybe I wish that they would also provide standees that we can print out for the kind of NPC characters, the characters that the heroes encounter that are not combat encounters. Other than that, there's really nothing bad I can say about this game. And it has been in both of my kids' top 3 favorite games of all time, basically since we started playing it 4 or 5 years ago. So because of all that, I really have to rate it a perfect 10 out of 10. It's just a great role-playing experience for me to play with my kids. So then moving on to the games that I played with my adult gaming friend Paul, going in order, like I said, from lowest rated to highest rated. First we have the cooperative game Flashpoint Fire Rescue, and I have quite a few of the expansions that are available for this game. For our game this month, I played primarily with a second story expansion game with some elements from the Urban Structures expansion and the Extreme Danger expansion. I ended up playing this with my youngest son and with Paul, and the 3 of us ended up losing our game. Now, I love the theme of the game, and it's a somewhat simple system in that it's all based around action points. Every character, or every player I should say, has a certain number of action points they can use with their firefighter every turn to run around, put out fires, rescue people, drag them out of the house, and so on. The first problem is there are a couple of things that really make it a somewhat complicated game despite the simplicity of that basic structure. One is that the more interesting elements you add from the various expansions, the more rules there are to keep track of in terms of how you can use your action points, such as carrying ladders, climbing up and down ladders, using elevators, dealing with certain types of hazardous materials, and so on. And so I'm going to put that down because there's a lot of stuff in that box. It becomes a lot to keep track of, but the major problem I've had with this game since I got it was the way the victory system is set up. So essentially, if I remember correctly, because I have house ruled it a little bit, but I think that the original game says there are 10 people and pets in this burning house that you need to pull out of the house and rescue, and if you save 7 of them, then it's considered a victory, and if you lose more than 3 of them, then it is a loss. And in my mind, especially as an ex-paramedic, I'm thinking, so we can lose 3 people to horrible fiery deaths in this house and still claim a victory in the game. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me. And so I've tried to play with the way this setup is done so that I can create a victory condition where you need to rescue everybody in the house in order to achieve a victory in the game. I haven't really quite figured out that balance yet of how hard to make that initial setup in order to make that possible. Partly because so much of it depends on random chance. You can definitely get scuppered by rolls of the dice in the game. So I've attempted to tweak it a bit, haven't quite got it there. My rating of the game as I play it with my slight variant tweaks is 7 out of 10. Without my own adjustments, it would probably be more like a 6.5 out of 10. And Paul rates the game 6 out of 10. So that puts Flashpoint, I guess, into the category of good game, but not especially great. I definitely have much better cooperative games on the shelves that I would go to before Flashpoint, although I am keeping it for two reasons. One is I do enjoy the theme as somebody who worked in emergency services for 16 years, and my youngest son in particular has a real affinity for that game, especially since one of the firefighter characters you can play is an actual rescue dog. So all the rest of the characters are your standard different types of firefighters, but there is that one dog character that he enjoys playing. Next up we have Trains, played with the Trains Rising Sun standalone expansion, and this is one I've talked about in previous months, so I won't go into it too much here. It's basically a train game that's built around deck building. So you start with your little hand of basic train cards, and then you collect more cards to be able to lay more track and do more powerful actions in the game. And it scales really well. We played it 2 players, and they have specific 2-player maps that are very small and condensed so that there's some forced interaction between players. And one thing I've been really enjoying with Trains is the fact that with the Rising Sun expansion, there is a huge selection of cards, and you only play each game with kind of a small assortment of those cards. So you kind of either randomly choose cards, or what I prefer to do is I like to curate my own game by selecting a group of cards to play with for that game. And in so doing, I can tailor each game towards a specific style of play. For instance, the last game we played, I chose a lot of the cards that allow you to trash cards from your hand so that you can create a compact, powerful deck of cards. I was thinking that the next time we play, I might try to choose a lot of the cards that give money so that we can have a really money-rich game and include some of the higher cost victory point cards in the game. So you can style each game that you play by choosing an assortment of cards to play with. We had fun again with this one. Paul and I actually tied in points, but he won on the tiebreaker. I rate the game 7 out of 10, and Paul rates it 7.5 out of 10. So again, another pretty good game. Next up is a game called Onironauts, which is one that isn't currently available in Canada, or at least wasn't when we went to play it last month. So basically, since I own the game Dixit, I was able to use the cards from Dixit and cobble together a few other components and download a random word generator app on my phone. And with all those things together, we were able to play Onironauts together. And Onironauts, if you're familiar with the game Dixit, and I hope you are, because it's a really amazing little group game that plays well with about 3 to 6 players. But Onironauts is more or less a cooperative version of Dixit that you can play with 2 players, and it's not super ideal with 2. I think it would be better with more players, but it does work, and we did really enjoy trying out Onironauts. The other advantage is that it is easier to explain than Dixit. Dixit has kind of a slightly complicated scoring system where you want some people to guess your card, but not everybody to guess it. Whereas in Onironauts, you simply want all players to guess the same card that doesn't belong, and it's interesting the way that it's done in a cooperative manner. So I rated the game 8 out of 10. I could see it possibly going even higher if I were to try it with maybe 3, 4, or 5 players. And Paul rates it 9 out of 10, so it ended up being a big hit. When Onironauts does eventually get released and become available here in Canada, I'll be looking at picking up a copy. I'm really hoping it has big Dixit-sized cards so that I can combine all the cards for Dixit and for Onironauts, depending on which game I happen to be playing. That would definitely be ideal, but I don't know what will end up being the case when the game is released. And then just before I get into the two games that I purchased in November, let me just take a quick second to send out a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters. This is a season where people on disability like myself can experience a lot of financial stress, so every little bit that you are sending me is greatly appreciated and does make a difference for me, so thank you very much. So this next game here was a impulse purchase. I was out at the mall doing a bit of Christmas shopping for my boys. I was in the toy and game store in the mall there, and I saw this game on the shelf, and it is one that I had previously been looking at online and thinking that it looked like it was pretty fun, and that is the cooperative train game Switch and Signal. Now, speaking of financial difficulties, this is probably the last impulse purchase I'm going to make in a very, very long time, but Switch and Signal is very interesting in that it takes the popular theme of train games and turns it into a cooperative experience. I played this with Paul, and basically the two of us were working together to control train movements on a board, and your whole goal is to pick up some cubes and deliver them to some cities that require those goods cubes. And at first things start off relatively calm as there's just a few trains on the board, but then as time goes on, more and more trains appear and more stuff is happening that you're trying to juggle all at once, and you basically are changing switches and signals on the board to direct which way the trains go in order to pick up the goods. Even though we played the game on a slightly easier level of difficulty than the kind of base normal level of difficulty, we still ended up losing our first game, which I think is good. You don't want to play a cooperative game for the first time and instantly win it, because then where are the future challenges going to be? But I guess in regards to that, one thing that's cool about this game is there are various ways to either increase the level of difficulty or decrease it, and it's easy to adjust that level of difficulty based on your own preferences and how good you get at the game. One thing I will say about Switch and Signal is 2 players is where you want to be playing it, because the number of players doesn't change anything about the game other than it gives each individual player fewer opportunities to make decisions and interact with the game. So 2 players is definitely the sweet spot. I would say next up would be probably 1 player. I could see myself, even though I almost never play solo board games, I just don't really enjoy it, I could definitely see myself setting this up and giving it a shot on my own to see how it works out. But overall it would be a less good experience with 3 and 4, although again, it's a cooperative game, so you could definitely all work together and have an enjoyable time. It's just that each individual player would have less agency about how the game is playing out. I really enjoyed this one. I rated it 8 out of 10, and Paul gave it a rating of 7.5 out of 10. So it was definitely a hit, but not quite as big a hit as this next game, which is one that I've had my eye on for a while. I've talked about how much I enjoy polyomino style games such as New York Zoo, where you have all these funny shaped tiles and you're trying to puzzle them together to fit into spaces. And I was able to find a copy online of Planet Unknown. What a cool game this is. The gameplay itself couldn't be simpler in that literally all you're doing on your turn is you're choosing one of these polyomino tiles, you're placing it on your planet, and then you're increasing 1 or 2 of your technologies based on the tile that you chose. And that's it. That's all you're doing. But there are so many things interacting with this game based on how you're building things on the planet, based on these technologies that are increasing as you fill out your planet space. There are also certain goals you're working towards. You have common goal cards that you're competing with your opponents over, and you have a private goal card that you're secretly trying to work towards for bonus points. There are so many things that are coming together in what is otherwise a simple polyomino place your tiles type of game, but it makes it so interesting. There is so much to think about with each single tile placement, each turn that you take. And in November, we just played the standard basic planet and corporation, which means that everybody is playing on the same planet, everybody has the same technologies available. But the game comes with several different asymmetrical planets that each have their own restrictions and rules for how you can play tiles on the planet, and they each come with their own corporations where your technology tracks differ from one player to the next. So I'll talk about that when I talk about games played in December, but even playing just on the basic planets with your basic corporation, it was a really fun experience. I rated the game 9 out of 10. Paul rated the game 9 out of 10 as well. So this was instantly, I would say, probably my top 20 games of all time, which, considering I've played hundreds of games over the past 20 years or so, it's a very, very high ranking. So yeah, this was definitely a very worthwhile purchase. I'm very pleased with it, and I'm happy that I had such a good month of gaming. Did you have a good month of gaming? Did you play any games? Did you pick up any games? Let me know how your gaming month has been going and what you've been up to lately. I'm always interested in hearing about that. Thank you so much for watching. The preceding video has been brought to you free of charge by me, Josh. The only thing I ask in return is that you could do one of the following: give me a thumb up, push the subscribe button, or share the link to this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it. Cheers! Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful that you've chosen to spend some of your time with me as I talk about the games that I played and purchased in the month of October. Is it October that I'm talking about today? No, it's November. Oh man, what month is it? What is time? Time is a flat circle. Anyways, all right. Then in the environment, or the... I couldn't think of really anything that... The problem is, there are a couple of things that... But the major problem I've had with this game since I got it was the fact that... But the major problem I've had with this game since I got it was the... And I played this with Paul,